I think a big milestone was just saying, okay, recreate yourself now. Don't worry so much about clinging on to who you used to be. You can create a new identity with remnants of the past identity.
Welcome back to the Spero Hope podcast, where we take storytelling to a whole new level by sharing inspiring patient stories, interview community experts, and share resources for clinicians and students. So today we have with us Rahul. Hi, Rahul.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you.
And Rahul is one of our patients at Spero, although he lives in Dallas, so he joins with us via telehealth, which is pretty cool. So Rahul, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what do you do for a living, and what do you do for fun?
Sure. So my name's Rahul. I was born in Carbondale, Illinois, and then my family moved to St. Louis pretty early on. I was like 4 or 5. And so I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, went to college at St. Louis University. Um, I was pre-med, graduated in 2018. Around that time, my family moved to Dallas. And so after I graduated, I moved down to live back home until med school. And so I was working as a medical scribe in an endocrinology clinic. And that's when my accident happened. So I had a C4, C5 spinal cord injury. And, that was about 4 years ago. So ever since then, it's been just recovery / moving forward, figuring things out, redefining myself, and, that whole journey. So that's pretty much it. But yeah, I like to think of myself as a regular guy. I like hanging out with friends, playing sports, listening to music. Um, and yeah, that's about it.
Are you still working as a medical scribe?
No, so that whole journey was, I was accepted to medical school right before, about a month before my accident happened. And so, I was in Houston for rehab. I did that for 2 months, and the goal was to continue with medical school. And, so a lot of my OT and stuff, not a lot, but a little bit was geared towards going back to school. But actually, about a year, I deferred for 2 years to focus on rehab. And then, ultimately I decided I didn't really want to do med school and all of that, not because I couldn't, but because I wasn't a huge fan of, like the healthcare
The
system. And
healthcare system.
yeah, yeah. And, and props to anyone who's in the system and working. And I have a lot of friends who are now physicians. But I just felt like I could do more with my story and my experience in a different setting. So I'm actually pursuing clinical psychology right now. And that was after a lot of soul searching. But I feel like it's a good fit.
Wow. If you feel comfortable sharing, how did your accident happen?
Sure. Yeah. So I was driving home from work. It was nighttime. This was November 28th of 2018. And I was merging onto the highway, and the SUV in front of me slammed on its brakes abruptly. And so I didn't have any choice but to just slam on mine. There were cars in the right lane, and on the left side was like a barrier. And so I just slammed on my brakes. I remember skidding on the asphalt, and I ended up, hitting the car. I rear-ended him. That's when I passed out, and then I woke up, and I was still restrained behind the wheel, but my car was like spun out into the ditch. And so the airbag was deployed, but I still hit my head on the steering wheel, and so that's what caused the spinal fracture. And so yeah, that's pretty much it. It was like a blink of an eye, and your life kind of just changes in an instant.
Yeah. How has the recovery been since then?
It's been really good. Um, I think, you know, the first couple years after your injury, when you're going the hardest, you're seeing a lot of return, a lot of strength, a lot of function And then you kind of hit a plateau. For me, it was around like year 3, year 4, when, I was pushing my body, I was doing so much, but I wasn't necessarily seeing the same results and the same pace of results that I was seeing the first couple of years. And so, that's kind of, you have to listen to your body and you have to listen to what, it's trying to tell you. And for me, around year 3, 4 was when I kind of had to make the decision to move away from, not move away, but less emphasis on the PT side and more emphasis on just like returning to life, returning to, sports, being social, like dating, that kind of stuff that I was just putting aside. um, so it's about finding a balance, but I think that's also part of the recovery process too. So I think, putting it all together, it's going really well, the physical and the kind of personal side of it.
Oh, I love to hear that it's like going well. What would you say are some like big milestones you like hit like throughout that journey?
I think like even just putting on a shirt, I remember the first time that I was able to put on a t-shirt myself, and it felt better than any other like success that I've had in the past. And it's so small, like so trivial, but it's like, oh my God, because it's like, then you think about, okay, I don't have to ask anyone to put on a shirt for me ever again. Like that was a big concern back then. So things like that, transfers, which I'm still, kind of working on and tinkering, but for the most part, the technique, getting that down is big. I think the bigger milestones were just, coming to terms with myself and not clinging on to the past version of me that I kept kind of alluding to in my recovery and saying, okay, I'm going to get back to that guy. Um, I think I think a big milestone was just saying, okay, that you know, just recreate yourself now. Don't worry so much about clinging on to who you used to be. You can create a new identity with remnants of the past identity, but it doesn't have to just be that identity. I think that was something that really took a while for me to come to terms with, but once I did, it's been really good for me since then.
I like how you said you can create a new identity with remnants of the past identity. That's like that's very deep. That is very deep. You mentioned earlier, like how life is now. You mentioned sports, and then you mentioned dating. So, how has your injury like affected your relationships? And like, are you dating?
I'm not currently dating. I've dabbled with it, but nothing super serious. Uh, so I guess relationships, like friendships, um, I'm really lucky. I have a lot of friends who've been there since day one, and they, you know, put in the effort to reach out, and many of them have like came to visit me in the hospital and have come to visit me, at home and stuff. And um, it's hard to really put into words what that means to me and to someone in my position. It might seem like an easy thing for someone else, but for them to like make time to come and see me and just be with me, that's been huge. As far as like the dating stuff, it's been different. I should probably put more emphasis, more focus into it now. I keep saying like whatever I'll do. I'll think about it later. Like I have other stuff to focus on. Um, it goes back to the identity thing. I think I tried jumping into it a little bit, like 2 years ago, and I just wasn't ready because, like I said, I was clinging on to that old identity, and that's hard to do when you're trying to put yourself out there and suddenly people are asking you these questions like, what do you like to do, what are your hobbies, this and that, and you're like, well, I can't say that because I don't do that anymore. Like I played guitar for 12 years, and so that's hard to do now because I've limited hand function. And so I'm like, do I say that, do I not say that, so suddenly you have all these like big questions and you're on a first date and you don't know how to answer them, you know. So I'm doing a little bit now. I've messed around with the apps. I don't know. I should sit down and really work on my profiles more, but maybe later.
What is on your apps bio right now?
That I'm using. Oh man, I just made a Hinge, and it's interesting. I was using like I've used Tinder. Tinder is stupid. Bumble, I have a Bumble, and Bumble's like, it's fun to just like sit back because the girls are the ones who message first. So it's like in that way, it's easy. You can just filter the ones who are actually interested or not. But um, yeah, I mean, my experience has been okay. It's definitely, you know, for me from the very beginning, I've wanted to just be transparent about everything. So I don't want to hide my injury. I don't want to hide the wheelchair. And I think there's a way to present that aesthetically and also like honestly without it being like the center of attention. And I think that's the balance that I had to find on these apps is like, okay, how do I put this information out there in a way that's not just me saying like, look at me, like I'm the guy in the wheelchair. So that takes a bit of tinkering, and I think, like I said, I need to sit down and just tinker a bit more. But um, the girls I've talked to, and I've been on a couple dates and stuff like that, and it doesn't seem to be a huge issue if you don't make it a big issue. And so that's the biggest thing I've learned is like you can dictate the kind of the vibe of it, and if you keep bringing attention to it and keep bringing attention to your deficits and the stuff that you can't do, then that's all that they're going to think about. So a lot of it has to do with just how you present yourself.
Do you feel like society at large is pretty welcoming and accepting of people that are in wheelchairs, or do you have you had like a lot of negative experiences?
I have not had a lot of negative experiences. Honestly, it's been overwhelmingly good. And
That's awesome.
yeah, like I'm a student at UTD, and you know, like one example I always use is there's this one door that's super heavy, and it's not automatic, so there's no like handicap button. And so the only way for me to get through it is to ask someone to open it for me. And every single time, it's like there's always someone around and they're just like so enthusiastic to help me. And so, like, without their kindness, I wouldn't be able to get through my day. I've tried talking to the school, and they said that it's some kind of like fire hazard to put a handicap button there. I'm not sure. The UTD is actually very good with accessibility, but that's the one thing. Like okay, so but yeah. So without people's like kindness, I wouldn't be able to like get through my day. And so that's just one example. If you're at least willing to ask for help when you need it and willing to communicate, people are really eager to help. And so I haven't really had too many negative experiences. Um, with that being said, there's always those small little things, or it doesn't come from a negative place, but people can be very bound to their view of, I guess, normal. And so like a lot of people are like, can I pray for you, which is very nice and very kind. And I'm always open to that, but at the same time, I wish society was a bit more open to just like letting people be in their situations and not always having to work towards like being normal or whatever society views as normal, and just saying, hey, you're you. Yeah, you're in a wheelchair, but I'm not going to sit here and wish that you're walking if that's not what you want. So sometimes those kinds of things can come up in conversation, and again, you can't really say anything to them. You can't be like, no, I'm not, like, I'm totally fine right now. You don't have to say like, oh, you're gonna make a full recovery. You're gonna be walking in no time. Like that's not necessary, I guess.
I'm like, it makes me happy to hear that your experiences have been mostly positive. And I like how you say how, like, people view like normalcy and think everybody is on their road to returning back to normalcy. And also like how at the beginning and throughout all of this, you've talked about that like new like recreation of identity. Um, what do you think has helped you the most transition from like the initial like hardcore like recovery period to like the acceptance and like comfort in the identity that you are today?
I think the two biggest things, one is just time. Um, you know, I'm now on year 4, and I think when I was year 3, it still felt early. I still felt like very recently out of my injury. And then once I got to year 4, I was like, okay, this is now, I mean, this is the length of your college career, that you've now been post injury. Um, you can't, like for me, I told myself that I can't stay in that mindset of like freshly injured kind of thing. I have to move on. Um, and so that was one thing, was just like the time post injury. And then the other thing, just finding my spirituality. I took this very kind of deep journey through, I was born and raised a Hindu, and I never resonated with it growing up. And so when my injury happened, I asked the natural questions of like, why me? And like, why would any God put someone through this, right? And I think most people after SCI or any kind of injury or disease would ask the same thing. And so I moved toward, I tried Christianity. I read a lot of the Bible, and I liked that. But again, I wasn't getting the answers I wanted. Buddhism, which I really like. But I made this kind of whole journey. I ended up back to Hinduism in a very weird way. I got very interested in like quantum mechanics. I don't know, like quantum physics type stuff, and then there's a actually pretty close relationship between the two. Anyway, to answer your question, part of the spirituality component was like realizing that I am not like the body, like the material world, the material stuff. Uh, you have to like kind of move past that, and that includes your body. And so, you can work with your body, all of that, but at the end of the day, you're separate from this physical component. And so that was a big thing for me, was realizing, okay, you use your body every day and all of that, and you want to make as much recovery as possible, but don't be so bound to it that you're forgetting everything else, or you're not putting time into moving on mentally and spiritually. And so that was a big thing for me as well, is just separating the two, becoming less materialistic in that way, and just, saying, okay, I'm not my body. I'm separate from my body.
Wow, I'm so drawn by like everything you said in that answer. Can you go back to the relationship between like quantum mechanics and like as it relates to like spirituality? Is it like in that like material versus like spiritual that the relationship is?
Yeah, kind of. I think the thing that drew me to, I was just trying to figure out what the whole universe, like what it's all about, what it, like the truth kind of to it. And one thing that quantum physics says is like there's so many different states of existence happening, like in one cell, right? There's different configurations. And then it pretty much is saying like it won't choose a configuration until a conscious observer looks at it. And then it's like frozen into that configuration. So that translates into like the way that I saw it was, okay, so anything is possible, right? They always say that, but really you have to, once you think about it and latch onto it and start working towards it, then that's how that manifests, is like those the reality will unfold itself if you're thinking about it and working towards it. It might not look exactly how you think it will, but if you keep the big picture in mind and just like every day to take steps towards it, then it's unfolding itself. And so that's the relationship I saw between, quantum, and then I guess you could say that's a spiritual thing. For me, it ended up unfolding in a spiritual way. Um, but it just made a lot of sense when I learned it that way. I was like, okay, that's what people mean by like anything is possible.
Gotcha. That is so very interesting. Like very interesting. I like how you like link those two and describe them. What drew you to clinical psychology?
I worked with a neuropsychologist when I was an inpatient. So that was my first introduction. She did some like counseling with me, and at the time I was still a bit like, I guess you could say arrogant about it, because I was like, I don't need anyone's help. Um, I can do this on my own. But very quickly I learned that having a guiding hand is almost crucial for something like this, because it's so much loss all at once that it's hard to really cope with. And so that was my first introduction. But I'd say more than that was Amanda, the fabulous OT at Spero. Yeah,
Aww.
we had conversations, and this was towards the tail end when I really was just moving away from um, the med school doctor path, and there was this void, and I had this like identity crisis. I'm like, okay, if, all of these things I've just lost. I've lost my hobbies, I've lost my body, and now I'm losing my career that I thought I would have from the age of like 6. It's like, who am I kind of thing. And I had that conversation with her, and she was the one who really put the idea in my mind that, she said you'd be a really good psychologist, sharing, using my experience positively, working with other people in similar situations. And so I looked into it more. I was also doing some therapy at the time, and, those things combined really is what led me to this path. And now it just feels, it feels exactly right. It feels like where I'm supposed to be.
Oh, I love that. And Amanda is pretty awesome. So that's really cool. Where are you in that degree plan? Like when are you graduating? What are your future
Yeah,
plans?
so it'll be a long road. I'm I did I did some like kind of undergrad prerequisite courses last semester and then spring semester, just to kind of like get back into the school mode and whatnot. And I'll be starting a master's program in the fall in applied cognition and neuroscience at UTD. And so I really like the neuroscience component of psychology. I think the kind of synthesis of the two is the way forward for even like spinal cord injury, but just broadly with like therapy, counseling. Um, and so after the master's, I would do a PhD in clinical psychology, and then I would kind of figure out what to do. Like you could do a fellowship in neuropsychology, which is a bit more diagnostic. You know, I could do rehab psychology. Those are kind of the two areas that I'm most interested in. And so you do a 1 or 2 year fellowship, and then after that, you're hopefully working somewhere.
And then you're planning on like staying in the Dallas area?
I like Dallas. I'm not, I'm open minded. I like Texas, which I never thought I'd say that. When my family moved to Dallas, I'm like, why? Like, I was trying to go up to like the Northeast, but now that I'm here, it's awesome. Like, there's a lot to do, like Dallas, especially. There's so much to do here socially. My family's here, which I really value a lot more now. And then the weather is great. So, yeah, I don't really see myself moving out. I like Austin too. So, between Dallas and Austin, and maybe Houston. Throw Houston in there too. Yeah, I
Rahul,
know.
come down to Houston. We have good
You
food,
do, you do.
The music is pretty
It's a
good.
little muggy, but it's okay. I can deal with that.
Yeah, it is pretty muggy.
Yeah.
I have a couple more questions. I wanna ask you, like, if you were to meet someone that's like newly injured, and you got to talk to them for like 2 minutes, what is like one thing you would tell them?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing is just don't compare yourself to anyone. It's really easy to see other people with your same diagnosis and be like, okay, well, they're there and I'm here. Like, I'm clearly not doing enough. It, if you start doing that, then, you're only hurting yourself. And, you have to realize that every injury is different and everyone has access to different resources. Everyone has different levels of trauma, so don't even worry about that. Just focus on putting one foot in front of the other. Wake up and just try to do better than the day before for yourself. That's all you have control over. So I tell them that, and then if I could sneak in another thing, I just tell them like, just focus on like finding joy and stuff. I think that's why we're here. That's why we exist. It's like to experience life. Not just to stress about it and try to like be successful and everything, but just like be present, enjoy the present, and try to find happiness wherever you're at. Don't always be looking towards the future. I mean, it's good to look to the future, but also make sure to like be here and be grateful for what you have now and find joy in it. I think those two things are really a recipe for success, no matter where you are and what kind of injury you have.
Nice. Nice. And now, if you had 2 minutes with pre injury Rahul, what would you tell him?
Oh man, it'd be a fun conversation. I would tell him, I just tell him that's gonna be okay. And like, as cliche as that is, it's true. I mean, it's just, you can't even fathom that when people tell you that early on. And, I wouldn't believe it from anyone other than myself, like that's the thing. But because in that situation, you're like, I just remember those early days. I mean, it's brutal, right? It's like you literally feel like you've lost everything in one instant, and it's not even your fault. And so I think just to be able to hear that from myself, that like, I know everyone else is saying that's going to be okay, but I'm telling you, like, it's going to be okay. You're going to get through it. It's going to be hard. It's going to beat you down like worse than anything else. You're going to feel like you're losing your 20s while all of your friends are thriving. You're going to feel like, the universe is out to get you specifically on certain days, and you didn't do anything to deserve it, but just know that it's going to be okay, and just try to learn the lessons that the universe is trying to teach you. I mean, this kind of stuff does happen for a reason. It means that there are things that you're supposed to learn from it. It's not just happening to happen. It's not just happening because you were a bad person or something. So like read between the lines at every opportunity that you get and try to see like, okay, what is this trying to teach me? And then really try to internalize those lessons. And if you get in the habit of it from early on, then it just becomes like second nature. You don't even think about it. If some kind of adversity pops up, you stop thinking, why is this happening? You start thinking like, okay, what should I get from this? You know? So I think that's what I would tell them.
Love that. And if you had 2 minutes with a healthcare professional that's about to enter the profession, what words of advice would you give them? So maybe things that like your providers have done with you that you think are like have been super helpful, or things that they've done that you're like, please never do
Yeah.
that again. you know? Words of advice for neurotherapists, neurophysicians, and all the things.
Hmm. I think OTs and PTs are really good at like, because what you guys do, like, no, seriously. I mean, every OT and PT I've had has been so good at just like making me feel comfortable. I think other healthcare professionals should learn from you guys. I think what you guys do really well is you're not scared to ask us the tough questions. Like, why, like, how are you feeling? Or what makes you feel sad right now? Or like, a lot of other professionals might shy away from that kind of stuff because they think offend us or make us feel sad. But I think at the end of the day, most of us want to talk about that stuff and we want it to be known, whether it's, the depression aspect of it or the even like hopelessness stuff, but even the positive stuff, right? We just want to talk. We like to talk about our experience and not just the superficial stuff and not just the hearing that things are going to be okay. And um, so I would say that don't be afraid to kind of probe us and like try to talk about deeper stuff. At the end of the day, I think it'll reveal more about us and our challenges in our life and what we need out of you than just superficially asking, like, are you in pain or, those kinds of questions. So, yeah, that's what I would say. I'd say just don't be afraid to get deep, inappropriate, like, don't ask the deep questions in the first 10 minutes of meeting us, but maybe, the second meeting.
I love that. I love that. If you had a thank you list, who has been like super instrumental in your journey? Who would you want to say thank you to?
Oh man, my mom is number one always. I mean, yeah, I can't put into words how like she's been there she's seen me at my absolute worst, and she's been there, for the highest highs, the lowest lows. So mom's number one for sure. Um, my dad as well. He's also been there. Both my sisters have been there since day one. They've been my best friends through, I mean, pre-injury and post-injury, and it amazes me how quickly they adapted to it, and also just how well they're able to read me. Because I'm not really like I don't talk much about like how I'm feeling with them, but they just know somehow. And so they've done a lot for me, you know. So thank you to them. Thank you to, yeah, all my friends, especially the ones who've made an effort to reach out or visit me or, call. That stuff is, it doesn't go unnoticed. Um, Man, there's a lot of people to thank. All my OTs and PTs, they're number one. Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on. Even just like people who follow me on Instagram, like people message me, you know, either people I haven't talked to ever before or people who like I went to high school with who I haven't talked to will message me and just say the nicest things about, they're following my story and how much it's helped them, or just kind words like don't stop, like those kinds of things go a long way too. Like I'll screenshot those and just read them when I'm having a hard day. I really appreciate stuff like that. That's most of the list. I could go, I mean, all of my family, there's just so like they've just really come through. Like even like my cousins, my aunt and uncle, everyone. It's just amazing. And like I can't thank them enough, and they don't want to hear me thank them, but like I do, like I'm very grateful for them. So yeah, I think definitely them, definitely my family.
That's awesome. Rahul, do you have parting words or something I haven't asked you about that you really want to share?
Um, no, I mean you've asked me a lot. I think if there's any message that I want to get out, it's the whole idea of disability. Don't internalize it. Don't worry so much about it, because at the end of the day, disability is just a mismatch between you and your environment, right? And this environment that's been created all around us. So like it has nothing to do with like you as a person. It's more just, okay, my physical ability is not fitting with what's is created here. So how can I reduce that mismatch? And so if you think of it that way, it becomes easier to like get over it. And the other thing is just defining your own independence. I think early on, I was so focused on like, I have to do everything myself. I have to do this. I have to do that myself. I can't rely on anyone else because that's how I was before. And I think over time, my definition of disability or of independence has definitely changed. And now it's more, okay, how can I have control over everything, or how can I like dictate everything on my own terms? So if that includes like, hiring an attendant or something, that's still independence for me because like I'm the one hiring, I'm the one doing the payroll, I'm telling them what I need and directing my own care. So for me now that falls under independence as well, or like making calls to for transportation, or directing someone to do something for you. Even if you're not doing it yourself, you're still in control of it, and that's still your mind, that's still your desires being carried out by you. It's just with the help of another person's physical abilities. And so I think, don't get so caught up on being disabled or being or not being independent. Focus on the bigger picture of just like having control over your life. And if you think of it that way, then the solutions will just start coming naturally, and it becomes easier to figure things out.
That is so insightful, especially when you said disability is just a mismatch between you and your environment. Like I've never heard it like put that way, and wow, that's you need to like trademark that, start writing a book, you know, maybe start a
I'll put I'll
podcast.
put it
We
on a
do
T-shirt or something. Yeah.
put it on a shirt.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Rahul. Like, thank you for taking time out of your day to have this conversation, and I'm sure it's really gonna touch someone, and so I'm super grateful that you took
Yeah,
that
thank
time.
you. This has been awesome. I love, sharing my experience and stuff. So, what you're doing with this podcast is really great. So, thank you.